I'm really excited to show you guys how to make my Crescent Cable Cardigan today. Just wanted to give you a little overview about how it's constructed so you understand. So you're gonna knit 2 front panels. You'll knit the back panel, then you'll seam the front panels to the back at the top, then you'll knit the sleeves flat, and then you'll seam the sleeves to the front and the back, and then you'll seam everything together underneath the arms and then down the side. So everything is knit flat. You will pick up stitches and knit 1 by 1 rib for the collar. So basically it's a drop shoulder open cardigan. So the sizing is very forgiving. I did want to tell you guys a little bit about sizing. So I knit a size 2. I'm a 36-inch bust, and I knit a size 2. I just want to take a little bit more time to talk to you about yarn and gauge and how this cardigan works up. So this is the back. And when you knit cables with acrylic yarn in general tends to not block as well. This is made with 100% recycled polyester yarn. This Lion brand Respun, thick and quick. Okay, so this does not stay stretched out very easily. It tends to bunch up. When you knit with wool yarn, when you knit with natural yarn, it will not bunch as much and it will block much more easily. So if you want to knit this with any sort of yarn that has natural fiber in it, just know that it will stretch more. It'll stretch more in width and it'll stretch more in length. So you might want to go down a size or 2. So just take the time to really figure out what kind of yarn would work well for you. A note on using Lion brand Wool-Ease Thick and Quick. That is thicker yarn and has wool in it. So it will definitely be wider than this Respun Thick and Quick. So I suggest going down a needle size maybe, or going down a size or 2 if you're using with Wool-Ease Thick and Quick. A lot of people try to substitute Wool-Ease Thick and Quick with Wool-Ease Respun, and it is very different yarn. So I just wanted to take a second to make a note of that. So just wanted to take some time to explain that. So be intentional about the yarn you're using, pay attention to its content, and just know that if you do use wool or other natural or yarn with any sort of natural fiber count, it will stretch a lot more in width and length. So the larger 2 sizes have an extra cable. If you don't want your sweater to be as long, you don't have to do the cable repeats as long. Also, note that if you are using a natural yarn, your sleeve length might be different. So just pay attention to sleeve length as well as you start knitting. All right, I'm done talking about that. Let's move on. Just click the links provided in the video description so you can get your own copy of the pattern PDF, and then you can have your copy and knit the cardigan along with me. All right, I am going to cast on the number of stitches that my size calls for the fronts. You make the left and the right front exactly the same. So I am going to start by making a slip knot, placing that on my needles. If you want to use 9mm straight needles, go ahead. I am just using circular needles because that's what I like to do, but you're just going to start by casting on the number of stitches that you need to cast on for your size. And then we're gonna do 1 by 1 rib after we finish casting on. All right, I've finished casting on my stitches. This is considered the right side of the work. So now we're gonna flip and work back on the wrong side of the row. And we are going to just do our 1 by 1 rib. So I am purling 1, knitting 1, purling 1, knitting 1, all the way across. Nearing the end of the first 1 by 1 rib row, I'm gonna turn the work. Now we're back on the right side of the work and we do the same thing. Since we have an even number of stitches, we are starting with a purl again. So you just purl the purl stitches and knit the knit stitches. So you're gonna continue the 1 by 1 rib until the length that the pattern calls for
for the bottom ribbing. So I will see you back here when I am done with the 1x1 rib for the bottom ribbing. All right, so I have just finished my last 1x1 rib row. You want to make sure you have finished after you have completed a wrong side row. You can tell that this is the wrong side, and now I'm ready to work on the right side. So when you're ready to work on the right side, you are going to follow the directions. We are doing a combination of purling, then knitting, then purling, then knitting, then purling. Each size has different number of purl stitches on the right side at the beginning. So our cable will go across 8 stitches. So you're going to purl across the first number of stitches. It says to purl for your size. And then once you've purled those stitches, you're going to knit 8 stitches because our cable runs across 8 stitches. And then you're going to purl across a certain number of stitches that your size calls for. And then you're going to switch to knitting 8 stitches. And then you're going to purl the rest of the stitches. So the spacing works out differently for each size. However, the cable will always go across 8 knit stitches. So basically, we've got a set of purls, knit, because that's going to be a cable, purl, and then a set of 8 knit stitches, because that's going to be a cable, and then we purl at the end. So you're going to continue, so you're going to flip the work, and then that's going to be reversed. So we first purled, now we're going to first knit. So you're basically just knitting the knit stitches on the wrong side and purling the purl stitches on the wrong side. Okay, so you're going to continue this on for the number of stitches, or I'm sorry, for the number of rows. Your pattern says every pattern will continue on for the same number of stitches. So I will see you back here when it's time to do a cable row, and I'll show you how many rows you should have. So I'll see you back here in a little bit. Okay, this is what your piece should look like now before the first cable row. So we've purled a series of stitches, knit, purled, knit, purled, and now it's time to kind of twist the stitches. So this should be on a row 13, so you've finished 12 rows, and you can count here 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 rows. I'm on my 13th row, and again, this is the right side of the work. So you're gonna grab your cable needle or your double pointed needle or whatever you're using to do your cables. I'm using a double pointed needle, and just remember, if you're using a double pointed needle, it needs to be the same size or smaller needle size that you are working with. So this is what we do to do a cable row. All right, we are going to purl to that first section of those knit stitches. So I'm just going to purl across here. All right, and now it's time to cable. So I'm going to take my cable needle or DPN, and I'm going to slip the first 4 stitches off the needle this way. Make sure you're slipping them off in this direction, not going like this. Come in from this direction. Okay, and then we're just going to kind of slide them in the center here. We're going to keep this needle in the front, and then we are going to knit 4 stitches. This is a little awkward, so it's okay if it takes you a little bit. 1 stitch, 2 stitches, 3, 4. And we're essentially twisting the work here, but we use this cable needle or DPN to kind of hold our stitches so we can skip over them. Now we're going to knit the stitches off the cable needle or DPN. You slip them to the other side so you can knit them right off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our work is twisted there. See? So we're gonna just purl to the next set of cable stitches or next set of knit stitches. So just purl across here, and then once I get to those knit stitches, same exact thing. Take my DPN, I'm going to slip those stitches off like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep my DPN or cable needle in the front, so those stitches are in front. I've got my working yarn in the back here, and I'm shifting, and I'm going to knit the 4 stitches over in the back here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm going to knit the stitches off the DPN. Slide them down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we just purl to the end. All right, so that was our first cable row. So our work should look like this. Now we're going to continue just knitting and purling the stitches until we get to the row where we're supposed to cable again. Just as an FYI, I'll show you. I already have the side, the other side finished. This is our, this length is a little shorter than the length we will do when we do a full cable. So at the bottom towards the ribbing, this length is a little shorter, and then we're gonna do a different length, a little bit longer before we cable again. So just pay attention to the pattern and how many rows you're supposed to complete before it's time to cable again. I believe it's 15 rows you complete now, and then that next 16th row we will cable again. So I will see you back here. You just, like I said, you continue knitting the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. Those purl stitches will be a little tighter in the back because we just completed the cable row, so just be mindful of that. All right, so I'll see you back here when it's time to cable again. Okay, now it's time for the second cable row, and you can kind of count the stitches, the rows: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, and this will be the 16th row. You purl across to your first set of knit stitches. You slip, I'm going to put the yarn in the back. You slip 4 stitches onto your cable needle. Hold the work in the front. Knit 4 stitches. Slide the stitches down so you can knit them off. Then you knit these 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now you've completed your second cable. I'll show you one more time. Purl across to your next set of stitches. Put the yarn in the back. Slip the first 4 stitches onto your cable needle. Put them in the middle. Knit 4 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slide the stitches down from your cable needle. Knit them off of your cable needle. And then you'll just purl to the end. All right, so we have our second cable row finished now. And you will just continue this until you've got, let's see, wrong one, until you've got, so we've done 2, so you need to do 3 more cable rows, and then we're gonna knit a little bit and bind off, okay? So keep going and I'll see you back here when it is time to bind off. Okay, so I have completed my front up until the point where I need to bind off. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cable rows. And then once I did my last cable row, I knit to the length that the pattern says to knit to and end after a wrong side row. So I'm ready to bind off in the established pattern on the right side. Okay, so you want to make sure you finish a row so that the right side of the work is facing you and you're ready to bind off, knitting on the right side of the work. So when you bind off in pattern, you're basically just keeping the established pattern, but we just bind off as we go. So my first stitch is a purl stitch, so I'm going to purl that stitch, I'm going to purl the second stitch, and now I'm going to bind off by slipping that first stitch over the second stitch there. So I've just bound off one stitch. So I'm going to keep going in the pattern and slipping that first stitch over the stitch I just knit, and that is my last purl stitch. So now I'm going to move to a knit stitch here, you can see, and this will be the top of the shoulder. So we're going to be seaming the work at the top here, but we're just going to keep binding off in the established pattern as we go. So I'm still knitting the knit stitches and purling the purl stitches, but I'm just continuing to bind off all the way across. So when you bind off this way, you'll always end up with one stitch left over. Now I'm back to purling. So then you keep doing this all the way across, and then I'll show you what to do when you get to that very last stitch. Alright, I'm nearing the end here. I've just got a few stitches left to bind off. Just want to show you what to do when you're at the end of binding off. So I've got one more purl stitch. I'm going to bind that off, and now we've got this last stitch, and so we're going to just snip a little tail and take our yarn and pull that through gently. Okay, so now we've bound off on the right side, and this is what our front looks like now. And you're going to go ahead and make 2 of the fronts. And one thing I wanted to note, before you block this, it's going to seem very thin. We're going to block it to be a little bit wider so that cable stitch definition, you can see that cable stitch definition a little bit better. So this work will be a little bit wider, so just keep that in mind. You can block the individual pieces as you go if you would like. But go ahead and make a second one, okay? Whoops, wrong one. Go ahead and make a second one, and your fronts will look like this. So we're gonna, after you've completed the other front and you've got these 2 fronts, you're gonna cast on for the back, and just remember, the back will be much wider. The back will be, like this, okay? And then we're gonna create a collar. So the back will be much wider than than one side. So go ahead and take your needle. I suggest using a longer needle for this one because we're gonna have a lot of stitches on for the back. And you're just gonna cast on just like you did for the left and right fronts, but you're gonna cast on for the number of stitches you need for your back. So go ahead, cast on stitches for your back, and you're gonna complete the back just as you did the left and right fronts. You're just gonna have more repeats. So there will be more cables and repeat. So I'm gonna cast on for my back stitches, and then I'm just gonna check back in with you guys so you can see what that's looking like. But there's really nothing different for the back. You're just casting on more stitches and doing more repeats of the cables to get you a wider back. All right, so I'll see you back here in a little bit once I've knit some of the back. All right, I just wanted to check back in. I've knit to the point where I'm at my first cable row, but I just wanted to show you what the back is looking like. I'm gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cables on the back. I have 2 cables on the front here. You can see for the fronts. So this is what the back looks like before it's time to cable. So again, you just continue working the same length, doing the same thing for the back, binding off at the same point. I also just wanted to mention, if you made any changes to the pattern, to the fronts, just make sure you do the same thing to the back so that it's the same length and that it looks the same when it's time to seam up. So again, you will do the same amount of cables, bind off at the same point you bound off for the fronts. So I'm gonna see you back here when I have completed knitting the back, and then it'll be time to seam the shoulders, the tops of the left and right fronts to the back. So continue working on the back, doing your cables, getting to the same length, and bind off, and then we will seam the tops together. So I will see you back here when I'm done knitting the back. Okay, I just wanted to show you guys what everything's looking like. I've finished the back to the length I need to finish it to, and I'm in the process of binding off in the established pattern now. So I am just knitting the knit stitches, purling the purl stitches, and binding off as I go, just as I did before. And then you'll do the same thing when you get to the last stitch. You'll just cut a tail and pull it through. So I'll see you back here when it's time to seam the backs to the shoulders. Okay, now it's time to seam the fronts to the back. You're going to want to have the work so that the back is on the bottom with the wrong side facing you. And now we're going to be seaming both fronts, the left and right fronts, at the top from the outside in. I'm going to, let's make sure the fronts are facing the right direction. So you want the right sides on the outside. The cables should line up. The reverse stockinette stitch should line up on both sides. I'm just going to show you how to do the left front here, and you'll do the same thing with the right front. When we seam this up, we just have to be careful because we've got reverse stockinette and stockinette stitch, reverse stockinette, stockinette, reverse. So the way we seam has to alternate, and then you just want to be careful that everything is lining up as best as it can. All right, so we are going to start by seaming reverse stockinette stitch. We've got the tops facing us. I have, I don't know, about 2 feet of waste yarn. Just make sure you've got enough yarn, same yarn that you are working with, through your tapestry needle here. And now I'm going to show you how I do this seaming with reverse stockinette stitch. So there's a series of smiles and frowns. I'll try to zoom in here so you can see. There's a series of smiles and frowns on reverse stockinette. So this would be a smile. This would be a frown. So we are going to insert our needle through the first frown on the bottom, which would be on that left front. And we're going to insert our needle, and we're going to leave a tail so we can weave that in later. We're going to meet it with the top of the back here. And because we went into a frown, we are going to go into a smile here. Okay, we are going to trace around that smile, come back out, or trace around the frown. We went into smile, we're going to trace around a frown here. We're going to go back through where we came. Trace around. Go back in where we came out, trace around, So you see these little ridges, we're basically just going in and out of these ridges, mimicking the stitch. Okay, now we should be up to the regular stockinette. So we are going to go in the V here, and you can pull this here. Then we're going to go through the upside down V up here. We're going to go through the right side up V. And the upside down V here. So now our work is lining up, and you're going to continue in this manner all the way across until you've reached the end. And then we will weave in our ends later. And you're going to repeat this for the other side, but you're going to make sure you do the same thing, but you start from the outside in as well. All right? So I'll see you back here once you've got everything seamed up. All right, just finishing up. The seaming, and just know seaming takes time, practice, but basically you're just mimicking the stitches and trying to make the seam look like it naturally goes into the work. So I like to end on the back, and then you just pull it through, let go, and then we will weave that end in later. Let me just zoom out here so you can see. So we've got the top seamed, and now we're going to do the same thing. That's the left side. Now we're going to do the same thing with the right side, starting on the outside and working our way in. So I will see you back here when I've got both sides seamed, and then we'll pick up stitches and knit the rib collar. All right, now that we've got our fronts seamed to the back, this is when I recommend doing the collar ribbing, because then you can try it on and adjust arm length if you need to. If you try it on now, you won't have the collar, so it'll fit a little differently. So I'm using 9mm needles here. I do my 1x1 rib pretty tight, so I'm not going to go down a needle size. If you know you do your 1x1 rib a little looser and you want a more finished look with your collar, feel free to go down to an 8mm needle. All right, so you're going to start at the bottom of the right front, and we're going to pick up stitches, 3 stitches for every 4 rows when we're working perpendicularly to the work, and that's to allow for the work to lay flat nicely. If you pick up a stitch for every row here, you'll have too many stitches. So basically, we're going to start at the bottom, and I like to add a few extra stitches at the bottom so the work doesn't pull up. I like to actually go into the bottom stitch here, and you're just going to join the work and start picking up a stitch by pulling the yarn up and over and pulling through. The first stitch can be a little tricky, and you're just going to leave a tail here. And I like to go pretty close to the edge here and picking up another stitch. Again, you'll see the work tends to pull at the bottom with the 1x1 rib because it bunches. So you can do an extra stitch there at the bottom. Okay, so we've done 2 stitches. I'm going to go ahead and do my 3rd stitch in the row right there. Okay, so now we're going to do the 3 stitches for every 4 rows. So we go into that first row or stitch here. 1, 2, skip a row, 3. And we're working into that first stitch here. Okay, so that's how we skip a stitch. I say 1, 2, skip a stitch, 3. 1, 2, skip a stitch, 3. And that's 3 stitches for every 4 rows. Okay, so I just ended on 3. So I'm going to go in the next one. 1, 2, skip a stitch, 3. 1, oops, 1, 2, skip a stitch, 3. 1, 2, skip a stitch, 3. So you're going to continue in that fashion all the way up until you get to the back of the work. And then we're gonna pick up a stitch for every stitch along the back. So I'll see you when I get to the back. Okay, so I am finished going up the right front. Now I'm at the back of the work, so I'm just gonna pick up a stitch for every stitch here. So I'm just going into that top V, pulling the work up, and make sure you're pulling the yarn from underneath over the needle, so the stitch is facing the right direction. And you're going to work all the way across the back like this, picking up a stitch. Now you're going to have a ton of stitches on this needle, so it will bunch up. It'll be a little annoying. So you're going to want to use the longest needle you have, but it's just the way it is when you pick up stitches like this. Okay, so I'll see you back here when we're done picking up stitches. So you're going to continue down the left front the same way you came up the right front. And one more thing, make sure you have an odd number of stitches. Okay, make sure you've picked up an odd number of stitches. I don't denote how many stitches you should pick up because everybody picks up stitches a little differently. So there's no point in doing like an exact stitch count. But just make sure you have an odd number of stitches because we want the stitches to be the same on the ends in the front. So you have to make sure you have an even number of stitches. All right, so I'll see you back here when all of my stitches are picked up. Okay, so I've picked up all of my stitches. It's a lot, right? And it's pretty bunched up here on the work because it's a lot of stitches. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna work 1 by 1 rib, but we're gonna slip the first stitch. So we're gonna turn the work, and this is what we're gonna do as we start working. And this is it can be a little awkward to work with. We're gonna slip the first stitch as if to purl, and make sure you don't pull that stitch really tight. Then we are going to purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then I'll meet you back here once I have gone all the way around and I'm on the last 2 stitches. Okay, I'm nearing the end of my first row of the 1 by 1 rib. Now I've got 2 stitches left, and I'm gonna purl these last 2 stitches, all right? And that last stitch will be a little loose. You can just pull that gently. And now we're gonna turn the work, and we're on the right side of the work. So we are going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, all the way to the end, 2 stitches to the end, and you should then just knit the last 2 stitches so that the bottom stitches line up and are even at the end. So you're slipping the first stitch only on the right when you start the right side or start the beginning of a row. You're not slipping any stitches at the end of a row. So you just work the last 2 stitches, whether they're knits or purls. It just helps to create a little bit of a cleaner edge with the ribbing. Okay, so continue on until the length, continue the ribbing, continue slipping the first stitch, whether it's a purl or knit, doing the ribbing, ending in purls or 2 purl stitches or 2 knit stitches. And then we're gonna work to the length that the pattern says, and then we're gonna bind off on the right side of the work. So I'll meet you back here once I've continued the ribbing and it's time to bind off on the right side of the work. Friends, now it's time to bind off on the right side of the work, which means I've just finished a wrong side row. I've turned the work over. The right side of the work is facing me. I'm at the bottom of the right front, and now I'm going to bind off in the 1x1 rib pattern, but I also just need to make sure I'm keeping these first 2 stitches knit stitches. So this was a knit and I slipped it, but I'm actually just going to knit it when I bind off. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches and bind off. I'm going to purl and bind off, knit, bind off. So you're binding off as you go, staying in pattern. Make sure you try to keep your tension consistent. Bind off so the bind off edge stays nice. It's a chunky yarn, so you might not have to bind off loosely, but just pay attention and see how your bind off is going. And try to keep tension consistent and not too tight, not too loose, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so I'll see you back here when I'm nearing the end of the bind off. All right, I'm nearing the end of the bind off. Remember, the last 2 stitches on the right side will be knit stitches. So you just knit those, bind off, and then snip your tail, pull that last stitch through, and you have officially bound off for that color ribbing. Now you can try the work on and see how it's fitting as far as where it's coming down on your arm to help you figure out arm length. So now's the time I suggest you try it on, see how it's fitting you, and see how long you want your arms to be, and just confirm that with the length for your size. You can pick a different arm size if you'd like, or length. So I'll show you all of that, how to knit the sleeve in a second. All right, now it's time to start the sleeve. You're gonna cast on the number of stitches your pattern tells you to cast on for your sleeve. All right, and then just remember that when you cast on, that's the right side of the work. We're gonna turn the work. We're gonna be working back and forth for our sleeve now. And now again, it's just a series of knits and purls based on what your pattern says for your size. So I'm going to start working my sleeve based on the knit stitches that my size pattern says, and then again you'll be working across 8 cable stitches. All right, so you're going to continue this, making sure you keep track of your rows. We don't start with the ribbing because we are working from the top down on the sleeve, so we'll end with the cuff, with the ribbing for the cuff. So right now we're starting at the point where the shoulder hits the top of the sleeve. So that's why we're just jumping right in with the series of knits and purls. So I'll see you back here in a little bit and show you what this is looking like when I'm ready to do my first cable. All right, I'm at the point where I am going to make my first cable row for the sleeve. This is what the sleeve is looking like. I'm knitting it flat. So I'm just going to do a cable row. I know you've seen this already, but just wanted to make sure you kind of saw along the way what the sleeve is looking like, just so you can knit along with me. All right, so you're gonna complete at least 2 other cable rows and then we're going to decrease and add the sleeve cuffs. So I will see you back here after I've completed my 3rd cable row on the sleeve, just before I decrease. So I will see you back here then. Okay, I've just finished my last cable row. I'm going to turn the work on the wrong side and work one more row. And then I'll show you how to do a decrease row for the cuff. So work one more row on the wrong side. All right, now I'm going to turn the work and we're going to do our decrease row for the cuff. So we will decrease about every other stitch, but you just need to make sure you have an even number of stitches. So we're going to decrease in pattern like this. We're going to work 1 stitch and then work 2 stitches together. So I'm purling right now, so I'm going to purl 2 stitches together. And then I'm going to work 1 stitch. And then I'm gonna work 2 together. So I'm knitting now, so I'm knitting 2 together. Work 1, work 2 together, work 1, work 2 together. Then I'm gonna switch to purling. Work 1, purl 2 together, purl 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, purl 1, purl 2 together, purl 1, work 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, purl 1, and I am not gonna purl 2 together for the last group, so I have an even number of stitches. Okay, so I did not work those last 2 stitches together, so I end up with an even number of stitches. So depending on your size, just follow the directions for how you're supposed to reduce stitches. And then now we are going to do a knit 1, purl 1. Actually, let's start, we're on the wrong side. We're going to start with a purl 1, knit 1. If you do want to reduce your needle size, I'm continuing on with 9mm needles. You can do that at this time and just start knitting on 8mm needles if you would like to reduce, but I do my 1x1 rib pretty tightly, so I'm just staying on the same needle size, but feel free to switch to smaller needles if you would like. So now you're just going to work 1x1 rib until you get to the sleeve ribbing length, the cuff length that the pattern calls for. So I will see you back here after I'm done knitting the sleeve cuff here and it's time to bind off. Okay, so I'm done knitting to my cuff length that I'm supposed to knit to. I'm on the right side. I am now going to bind off in the 1x1 rib pattern. Once you are done with this sleeve, you're going to want to make a second sleeve exactly how you did the first sleeve. And I do recommend blocking the sweater before you start working on the sleeve, just so you can see how long the sleeve is and where it will hit you. The sweater does block out to be a lot wider than it would if it's not blocked, because the cables just tend to really shrink the sweater up. So make sure you are, you know, trying the sweater on and seeing where you want your arm length to hit. Everybody's arms are a different length, so just a word of caution. Obviously, the pattern has guidance on length, but it does work out well to try on the cardigan and see where everything's hitting you from the shoulder, to see how long your sleeves should be. All right, so just finish binding off the sleeve, and then I'll show you how to seam the sleeves to the top of the cardigan. All right, we've got the body of the cardigan finished. We've got our 2 sleeves finished. Now we're going to seam our sleeves to the top of the sweater. So I'm going to show you how to do one side, and then you're going to repeat that and do the same thing for the other side. So first things first, you are going to want to, it's kind of hard to see where the cardigan is at this point, but you're going to want to lay it out flat so that the right side is facing you kind of horizontally, okay? And so it looks like this. We've got the shoulder seam here. We are going to first connect our sleeve this way to the sweater. So you're going to want to make sure that the middle of the sleeve lines up with the middle of where that seam is. Just going to scooch this back here. Okay. So you're going to want to attach the center. I'm using removable stitch markers, and I'm going to line up the center of that cable here to where I seamed my shoulder right here. Okay. And then I'm going to measure down using my tape measure to where my work is supposed to hit, how deep my shoulders, how deep the work is supposed to be from the shoulder, how long my armhole depth is. And that's where you're going to have to kind of stretch the work a little bit to that, okay? So this does tend to curl up a little bit because of the cable. So just make sure you attach the sleeve to the position where your armhole depth is supposed to be. And then you need to do the same thing for this side and just line it up and make sure you can connect that sleeve to where it's supposed to hit on the armhole depth on the other side. So this length should be the same as this length, and that length is what the armhole depth will be for your garment. Okay, so now I'm going to start seaming, and I am going to kind of just connect the work at the point where it needs to meet here, where my stitch holder. So I've threaded my tapestry needle with a pretty long piece of yarn, same yarn I've knit with. I'm gonna leave a little bit of a tail, and like I said, I'm just kind of connecting the work right now. And then I'm gonna remove that stitch marker so it's out of the way. Okay, so basically we are going to seam similarly to how we went into seaming the shoulders, but then we need to work vertically here. So we're going to mimic, we are going to go through, I'm going to try to get this close to you, we're going to go through 2 bars on the reverse stockinette stitch side. I'm going to pull through here. Okay, and then I am going to follow, I'm going to go back through the stitch, this stitch right here, and I'm going to follow the stitch around, so that would be the frown stitch here. I'm going to follow that, and then I'm going to continue up, going through 2 bars again here. And we might have to adjust how many bars we go through. So you're going to want to get this to line up as best as you can. You might have to adjust how many bars you go through vertically. And I'm going to follow this back through here. I'm just following this stitch, coming back through. And seaming up vertically. I'm probably only going to go through 1 bar on this reverse stockinette. We just have to, okay, so now I'm going to go through the V here because we're working on stockinette now. And then I'm going to go through 2 bars. But you're going to have to probably just kind of figure out how much you're going to have to alternate to get the work to lay flat and be spaced out evenly. It's not a 1-for-1 ratio for stitches going perpendicularly to each other. So I'm going to go through 2 stitches again and then 1 stitch and kind of see how that's working out. So see, it's working out pretty well right now. I'm just going to need to make sure that it lays flat. So work all the way across, seaming up these sides here, and then you're going to want to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to continue here along the same way, and I'll show you what it's looking like at the end. All right, I'm nearing the end here. I'm gonna remove my stitch marker since I only have a few more stitches. And I do want to say I did about every other row, like grabbing 2 bars and then 1 bar and then 2 bars and then 1 bar on the reverse stockinette stitch side. You just kind of have to see what your stitches, how it's all coming together. But now I am just wrapping this up. I'm going to go back through my last stitch here and pull this together. And then now I'm going to remove my tapestry needle. So now you can see we have seamed the sleeve to the body of the work. Now we are going to fold the work in half. And we will be seaming the body. Let me get this straightened out here. So now I've got the body and the sleeve. I just need to seam along up to the armpit and then from the sleeve to the armpit. So some people seam this differently. I like to work towards the armpit. So start with the cuff on the sleeve and start with the bottom ribbing for the body and work towards this armpit. I just think it works out better with how things come together. So I'm going to show you how to seam vertically now. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys how to seam vertically. I basically got a long piece of yarn. I've connected the bottoms. Here, I'll show you how I did this again. I thought I was filming and I wasn't. So basically this is the bottom, the body bottom, and we're gonna seam vertically, and this is pretty easy to do. I just like to first connect my my pieces, kind of just going through the last stitch at the bottom here. And then we're just gonna pick up 2 bars on either side. It's a little different when you, looks a little different when you do through the ribbing. But, okay, so my piece is connected at the bottom. I'm going to go back to the left side here. You're going to be working, in between the last stitch and the second to last stitch on this side, and in between the first and the second stitch on this side. And we should have ended with a purl and started with the knit, so it should be reversed. So it'll, when we seam it up, it'll look like a seamless piece. So we're going to go through 2 bars on this side. Try to zoom in here so you can see. 2 2 bars on that side, and then we have a stitch at the end still. And I am not pinning this, because if you work consistently, it should just work up fine. Okay, so this is going to look a little different because of the 1x1 rib, and now I'm going to pick up 2 bars on this side. 2 bars on this side. I've got that last stitch there, and I'm going to pull this through. You don't need to pull it really taut. Okay, so now I'm going to pick up 2 bars again on this side in between the stitches. Pull that through. 2 bars on this side. And then continue up. And then when we get to the reverse stockinette, it'll be similar, but you'll just be working, and then as you start to pull it, it'll come together. Okay, so that's lined up, just making sure you're working consistently. You're going in right where you came out, working up those 2 bars. All right, so now we are basically into the reverse stockinette side, and we're going to still just go up 2 bars on that side, and same thing, up 2 bars on this side. So that's how you seam vertically with ribbing and reverse stockinette stitch. And again, you can pull this, but it looks pretty seamless there, the bottom ribbing. All right, so continue to the armpit, and then you're going to stop at the armpit. Let me zoom out here. You're gonna stop once you get to the armpit, and then you're going to do the same thing from the end of the sleeve cuff to the armpit. I think it just works out a little bit better when you do it that way. So that is how you seam your sleeves and the body together. Okay, when you are done seaming, it's time to weave in all the ends. I'm just going to show you how I weave in some of the ends. Basically, you just want to use your tapestry needle and thread it back through, and then just follow the stitches with your needle. So when I do the cuff, I kind of just go through the cuff up one of the side legs of the stitch here, all the way up into the work. But basically, you're just trying to hide this extra piece of yarn. And you can run it up as high as you want, kind of pull it through, snip the yarn a little bit after. You're going to want to stretch it a little bit, and then you can snip the yarn. Okay, so basically just go through, and if you've got ends, I like when I have ends near seams, I just kind of weave the yarn back through the seam of the work, so you can't really see it on the other side. It just kind of stitching it through like this. Basically, you just don't want it to come through the front of the yarn. You can pull it and then snip it. All right, so that's how you weave in your ends. You're going to want to do that all around the sweater, and then block your sweater.